That's all right. That's all right. People used to ask me what I did with the money my mama gave me for singing
Well, I
lessons.
wondered why he would if he just retired, but then I figured that
Wonder what he's got in.
See that program?
I'm going down this evening and haven't seen the latest. You ready? Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Mayor's Agenda, City of Hannibal official public hearing, Tuesday, August 18th, 2020, 6:45 p.m. to Council Chambers. I call this hearing to order. Karen Burdett, Director of Finance.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The reason for our public hearing tonight is to set the levy for the property tax. And as you notice from my memo, it has increased slightly, but the reason for the increase is because the assessed values have gone down. And so, even though that this looks like an increase to the individuals, with property depreciation and the value goes down, and so it usually does not make that big of effect on their final bill. The library ended up being capped out at 30 cents because when it was voted in a number of years ago, it was voted in at 30 cents, so we cannot go over that. So this is the second time the last 10 years, I think, that it's hit that 30 cent and can't go any further. This is per the state calculation, and since we did not get the information until after our last council meeting, then later tonight, I will be asking for emergency reading so that we can have this passed, because our city clerk has to send this in to the state before the end of August. That will be up for your approval in just a little bit. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
This time, there's an open session for any public comments regarding this particular item, property tax values. Is there anyone here to speak for or against? No one appears. Are there any other comments at this time? We will go ahead and adjourn this public hearing and reconvene the regularly scheduled council meeting at 7 p.m.
Usually, no, this time I didn't.
Okay.
But
Short agenda.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the Mayor's Agenda, City of Hannibal Official Council Agenda, Tuesday, August 18th, 2020, Council Chambers, 7 p.m. I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Hark,
Here.
Councilmembers Bowen,
Here.
Welch,
Here.
Beach, McCoy,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson,
Here.
Councilmember Cogdell.
There being a quorum, I'll call this meeting to order. Councilperson Cogdell, would you do the invocation, please? We missed you last meeting. Yeah.
Gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you once again allowing us to come together, Lord, just to be in your presence, Lord, and to come together to make decisions, Lord, and to be stewards of this community. Lord, we just ask that you bless this community, Lord, that you bless each and every person in this room, Lord, and that you would just give us hearts to make good, wise decisions on behalf of the citizens. Lord, we ask that you bless the country once again right now, Lord, that you just continue to help us navigate through just so much uncertainty, Lord, with the COVID, Lord, and with everything else that's going on, Lord. We just ask you to continue to pour your blessings, Lord. Bring the rain down over this country and this community, Lord, that you continue to protect us, continue to give us wisdom, Lord, and continue to help us stay in good health and in good mind and facing all of these situations. We ask these things in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson, would you lead us in the pledge, sir?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all.
Council, at this time, I'd ask a motion to excuse Councilman Beach from this evening's proceedings.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. I'm now looking for a motion to approve the agenda as it's posted this Tuesday, August 18th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion's carried. Council now requesting a motion to approve the minutes of the regularly scheduled council meeting of August 4th, 2020.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion over the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion's carried. Now requesting a motion to approve the payroll and claims for the first half of August 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion over payroll and claims? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion's carried. Council, under my name at this time, recommendation of reappointments for a first reading to the Hannibal Convention and Visitors Bureau. Beth Knight, continuation of reappointment for a term to expire September of 2022. And Scott Earhart for a reappointment for a term to expire September of 2025. There's no roll call on that. And I'll bring those back at the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Next item on the agenda is Karen Burdett, Director of Finance.
Hello again, Mayor, Council. Bring to you the setting the property tax levy for this year. We do have an increase. However, the increase basically takes care of inflation and depreciation. The assessed values have gone down. The only increase that we see in revenue has to do with new construction or improvements. This is the amount that the state calculates and says that we are allowed to charge. Library would have been higher, however, back in April of '89, when this was passed in the election, it was capped at 30 cents. So as I said before, this is probably the second time in 10 years that we have reached that cap. We did not get this information sent to us until the day after the last council meeting. And so I am asking for an emergency reading on this ordinance because our city clerk has to send this information back to the state by the end of the month. So We need both first and second reading tonight. Do you have any questions? Okay.
There's
Thank you.
not. Next item on the agenda is Edie Grotman, DPW Management Assistant.
Mayor, if I may say, okay, come on up, Edie. So Edie's going to do a presentation regarding the code enforcement software that we purchased several months back, which due to COVID was slowed down, but has finally been implemented to roll out. And Edie has been meeting every week with the gentleman from the firm and has done a great job with working towards getting this done. And so I just wanted to thank her for her hard work.
Okay, so this little card, this is the little website on it that we are using. Come in to access our new permits online, which I'm going to show here in just a minute. There's 3 sections to this new online program. There's a property maintenance section, there's a building inspector program, and then there's Department of Public Works, which puts like anything for the street department underneath it. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of makes things very simple. So
Will you move your mic up a little bit, Julia?
sure. That better?
Yeah.
And just speak real loud like you're yelling at your kid. I mean,
Okay, so when you log into the website that's on the bottom of that card, this is the screen that it brings you to. Eric went ahead and opened us up to it. Of course, this is Welcome to City of Hannibal. At the top, you can obviously search for what you're looking for. If you're going to, say, do a dumpster permit, at the top you could type in dumpster permit. It would take you straight to it. Or if you scroll down here just a little bit, there's the 3 sections. There's a building inspector section, code enforcement section, or essential services slash street department. The neat thing about here is, let's say you have a weed complaint. You could go right under code enforcement. You can go in there and you can type in where your weed complaint is. We kind of had this set up before, and it kind of ran through the Board of Public Works, but what we were finding was that people would put in bogus email addresses, and we could never actually find out who was doing the complaint. So on this one, once you go in and you register your name, your address, where you're at, you have to actually validate your email so we know that it's actually a legitimate person. We didn't have that set up before, so this way we know that it's actually a true person. We can actually get back to them before. So we didn't have that option before. Viable. So I'm going to go in and show you a building inspector permit, and then I'm going to show you a weed letter. The weed letter and what Mike Murphy does with the rental inspections are very similar, so I'm just going to show you one to kind of show you how it works. And our excavation permits work very similar to the building inspector programs too, just that way you kind of get a feel of how it works. To show you a registered side and then what it does when it gets to me and how we actually produce it out to our inspectors. So if you go into, let's say, building inspector office, you go to the screen and then you can scroll down, you can select whatever you're looking to do. So in this case, we're going to go and we're going to do an electric permit. Select it. Obviously, you're going to apply online because that's what we're gearing towards, being able to do everything digitally. In this situation, my information is already here, obviously, because this is what I do every day. If I wasn't here, this would just ask you to confirm your information, your name, your address, your email, because everything we're doing here is digital. So in this information, it's me. I'm already set up here through my work. So I would put everything in. You'd hit next. It's going to search for a location. We have worked with Marion County and the Board of Public Works to link all of our systems. We can link zoning information, flood information, mapping information. Worked really hard with, so the board, Devin, our computer guy, has helped us with this. We have, I'll show you here in a second. It's a pretty neat system. Before long, we'll hopefully be able to get rid of all of the maps in here on my wall just because they're so outdated, and this will be real time all the time. So in this case, I'm just going to use our building. So I'll go to 320 Broadway. It gives us our MBL number here. So I'll choose that location. going to locate it on a map for me. Tells me the name. If it had a phone number or anything like that associated with it. Like I said, bear in mind, we're still building. So, it gives us all of the information. It's going to tells us that we're tax exempt, lot size, and it'll be cool. So obviously I've linked my address with it. It has me located here on this little map. I'll hit next. Okay, so I'm going to select my information. My occupancy type here, obviously we're a commercial building. For our building, let's say we're going to do a new electric service. I'm going to choose a 200 amp unit, and I'm going to put in 10 circuits. Awesome. My contractor is going to be construction. Sorry. Colin Jim Bob. ABC Construction.
I guess these contractors will have it'll be saved under their name. So when they
It will
log
be,
in,
yeah,
like
everything,
people that
everything.
frequently do
Yeah,
it, it'll
we do.
auto-populate.
And once it gets to like me in the office, we actually check their business license number to make sure that they're legitimate. This one we'll just put test,
Sure.
just for sole purposes. He lives at, let's say, 4 Wright Street.
Play your tab over. That might be helpful. Okay. Welcome.
2555 5555.
Seen that in movies. Seen that in the movies.
Yeah. Fake when we're just pretending, and we'll do one at gmail.com. And of course, we would hit next. And then at this point, you would sign the application. Just put test. Just put a T. Sorry, I think it's just far away. So at this point, it's asking for an attachment. If we had building permits, we had pictures of anything that we would want to upload as a contractor, this is where they would have that option to do it. We will order printers to where we can scan permits here in the office if we need to. Anything that we want to attach to this file, we can do that. So that way, 10 years down the line, we would be able to go back and review anything that was ever done with this particular address. This is where we would actually do that at this point. And we can do that on anything. So let's say Susan has a weed letter, Joey has a building permit, and I have a complaint. These will all link together in this system going forward. So anything we ever have for that address building permission, we can actually link to this file as well. So it will be really nice. So here's where everything that I just put in, you can go back and you can check all of your information, make sure you didn't miss anything. You confirm and you submit. That you want to say last minute, thanks for the review, have a nice day, whatever, it gets to me. I actually just got an email on my watch to tell me at my office that an application just came through this program. So everything that comes through actually comes to me in the office originally. Then I actually get it, review the application, and get it out to either our building inspector or property maintenance department, depending on what it is. So I'm going to go in and show you that side of it now.
So how are the fees collected?
It's all figured for you. It's all done into it when the initial.
Are they at the end, is there a
We're
credit card
getting,
accepted?
we're getting that part of it up and running.
Okay.
And Edie, I want to mention that it's intuitive, based on what kind of permit you're doing, it'll take you through different questions
It
and
will.
only the ones that are
It
applicable.
will. So if you were to do like a new construction, the questions would have been completely different depending on what it asked. If it was a dumpster, it obviously would have been less. If it was excavation, it just depends on what kind. I just did electric because it's simpler. But the more complex that you do, the more complex questions it's going to ask. So if you would have done like a new build, it would have asked you electrical, plumbing, certain things about your contractors. It just, depending on which one you pick, it asks you. It
So-
even has like handicap application app on there, everything.
Is the goal then to eliminate City Hall, trips to City Hall? In other words, they can apply for their permit and receive their permit through this software?
I'll take that one if you don't mind.
Okay.
The goal is to make it as efficient and easy as possible for whoever's doing the application. So it'll still be their preference. We'll still happily accept anyone who wants to come down here, but for those who don't, we're offering this as a convenience.
Okay.
So
So then if they're coming in off the street, I guess my second question would be, you're still going to use the system? You'll fill in their information, then it'll be on file for ever?
Kind of both. Actually, we had a recommendation from Councilman Bowen to actually put some kind of a system on my desk, like a tablet of some sort, to where when someone comes in off the street, they actually can do this at my desk.
Okay.
And that way they can still fill it in, just so that way going forward, our records are more up to date. In the past, say like on building inspections, we found that someone may come in and apply, then it may get applied, but we never go back and we never revisit and finish the process. On this, it's a step-by-step basis, and the project can never be finished until the next step is complete. So this way we know that nothing never falls through the cracks. This system is fail-proof. We have to finish the permit. Otherwise, it reminds us every single day that a step isn't complete.
Okay.
And I'll show you on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like when it gets to me. I get an email. It tells me right here in my inbox that I have something to review. So I'll go in. I'll open the task.
Mouse pad.
I know.
Just a sheet of white paper would work.
Paper. Here is what I look at. When I get the initial application, I go into the details and I will review it.
it's much easier for her at her desk.
I'm sure.
So this is where I will actually scroll through it and make sure that everything is complete.
Finicky.
Make sure that all the information, whoever submitted it, like the contractor, make sure that it's, make sure that everything, phone number, and email, and address, contractor's information, everything that we, if I know that it's complete, I will mark it actually. I will write a note. But I would actually type application complete, all information, and I would actually just.
Corey's getting you a mouse pad.
Is there a way to make sure the application can't be submitted unless there's a phone number and an email and
It will
such?
not let me.
Okay.
So if you don't put a phone number, it will come back and it'll say
Okay.
this application. So it will highlight what information has to be.
Gotcha.
And these are decisions that we made in the build out in order to facilitate it and make it work better.
Here's the permit. So it automatically permit that was submitted. Electric permit this was all built ahead of time with Joe from Boston is what we call him. Every permit's different. So if you go in and do a new build, it figures all your electric, all your plumbing, your square footage, includes the fire department fee. Everything is built into that permit depending on what information either the contractor puts in or the building inspector puts in. And we actually go through and check to make sure that all those amounts are correct.
What happens if the contractor doesn't have a city license?
Then they don't, then we
Doesn't get
reject it.
accepted.
You reject it?
Yeah, we have the option on the application review to
I saw your
approve it or
reject
reject
button.
it. And that's where we go back and
Okay.
check to make sure that they have a license. And on like a new build, it actually has a place where we have to put in that contractor's license number or it won't let us move on from that step.
Okay.
So it does that. So this is where we could actually set a due date for a payment if necessary. Like if we know that, let's say that you're going to mail us in a payment, we're expecting it in 2 weeks. We would put a due date for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it's going to send us an email reminder. Hey, we haven't got this payment yet. You need to check on it. So down here on rough inspection, I can actually assign this I have the option to assign it to myself, something that I need to check on. So let's say if I was doing a zoning, I would obviously assign it to myself because our building inspectors don't assign zoning. That's something I would check. But in this case, I could assign it to like Mike Murphy, and then I can put a due date on it. So if it's a rough inspection, that's something Mike probably needs to check in 3 or 4 days. Then I would assign a due date to it. So in 3 days, Mike's going to start getting an email every single day that says, hey, Mike, you need to go out and check this. If he doesn't check it that day, the next day it's going to send him another email, and the next day until he signs off on that. So every day it actually sends an email to them until it's done, and it will do that every day until it's done for the rest of time. So that's how every step is set up in the system, is to remind them. That's how we know that these processes track. So kind of how it goes. Like, and I can Rachel, she did a new permit, and every time we complete one of the steps, she got an email saying, hey, your application was reviewed. Hey, we got your payment. Hey, your building department was approved. So she got like 8 emails from us. So that way the applicant knows as well, we're working on your permit. So it's kind of cool on that side as well. Hope you didn't find that
Oh, no.
I told that.
No,
But yeah,
not at all.
so it's a cool.
And really, Edie, don't you think that most, I mean, there'll be a select group of users that utilize this tool? I mean, your contractors, and I mean, you'll have various people too, but for the most part, it'll be the same people
It
day
will
in
be.
and day
And
out. So they'll
once-
be able to build a profile, and hopefully, when we build out the payment stuff, include almost like a PayPal, I guess, or whatever, so where they could just click and.
Right, so and once one contractor comes in and uses it, it will autofill that information for them. So after a while, it will just become second nature for them to use
Perfect.
it. So since the mouse is kind of running slow, like on Susan's side of it, when she has a weed problem, she'll put in a property, it will automatically, so she'll put in an address and it automatically generates a letter for her. She just literally puts in the address. She may not have a name because sometimes we don't have names on property. It'll just be a property that we know is bad. She'll put in the address, she'll put in the pictures, that letter will automatically generate for her. It takes 20 seconds to generate. Obviously not tonight because I'm having issues. After 10 days, it sends her that email reminder saying, hey, it's been 10 days. You need to go out and you need to check that property, see if it's been mowed, or if not, we need to do the next step, which in her case would either be haven't mowed or send the next letter. Same thing with Mike Murphy on his rentals. After his is 14 days, we either schedule an inspection or we send the next step. But the system does that for you. We don't have to set due dates. It automatically sets that date. So it's fail-proof. It just constantly reminds us, hey, we got to check it. And on Mike's, which is really cool, the rental side of it, after 3 years on a property, it reminds us in 3 years, hey, it's time to re-inspect that program. So it constantly checks it. It's really another thing that this process has is it has reports for us. So let's say Melissa comes in and she says, hey, I want to know how much money we've spent in dumpsters the last 6 months. I can run a report and tell her how much money we've spent just in dumpsters, how much we have in new builds. It generates all those reports from, she wants to know just like a 6-day window, we can run it for just that amount of time. So it runs every report we have. We can scan in any kind of receipts, any pictures we want with it. It's a really, really good program. So obviously we're building all the time. We're working on iPads for the guys and for Susan. That way when they're in the field, they can take them, they automatically to it, it's going to make the guys' lives very, very more accommodating for what they do with their job.
And it's going to be very much more efficient and an easier process for the person who is looking to get a permit or something done.
Yeah,
So
you can
customer
just
service.
do it all from home. So once it's approved, the actual occupancy just gets emailed right to that person. They don't ever have to come in here. It's just, it can all be done online.
So then on weed and trash complaints, are you wanting the council to use this system?
You
to
most definitely
report?
can. Yes. So if you get, you have a trash complaint, if you have a building inspector complaint, you have a street department complaint, you just go to that main screen on that thing and you just click on it. And you just, like I said, you set up an account. Everybody will have to set up that initial account, and you can send your complaint right there to that website, and then it comes into us, and then we can take care of it from there. And then it actually links that complaint to that address, and then we have a record
Would
for
that be
it
your
going forward.
preference?
It would be our preference just because we're trying to get everything electronic.
Okay.
If it's easier for you and you don't wish to do that, of course, we will still be happy to take it any other way. But in an effort to get everything electronic, and we're going to be going back and getting the old records and try and get those loaded
Well,
too.
It builds a history on the property.
Right.
So like I said, I apologize that I was having computer issues, but anybody, Councilman Bowen came by one day and I showed him how it worked in the office, and he's like, this is great. You know, it went much faster than this. If anybody ever wants to come by, they're more than welcome to see how it works. It's Susan started working with it last week, started putting in her records. She's done a few. It's going to take some time in the beginning to get everything set up, but Mike has been using his since June. He's been putting in all of his rentals, and he's ecstatic about it.
It moves
It's
us
going forward slowly.
to a different century.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
So, yes.
I have a couple quick questions, if you don't mind. When we build this out, you talked about like the weed complaints and stuff like that. Are we going to build out other city services on this, like the fire department and police department? I know like the fire department, you know, they have to go out and do occupancy inspections along with the building inspector, like a special event permit. They have to go do that. Is that something that we can streamline in? And then also with like the police department, like your parade permits, I know that's hit or miss. And then your community service officers, you know, we've talked about that in the past about complaints, and we've talked about, I think James mentioned, you know, it's hard to prosecute complaints on that when you don't have anybody.
I would let Lyndall speak to the police aspect of it with the CSOs, because they have a program called Lawman that they utilize, that the CSOs also utilize.
Right.
So I don't know what would be their preference, and I would leave that to them.
Sure, and I'd be interested to hear the chief's opinion, but just like to your point, you said, you know, they have to validate their email address and who they are. To me, that may be beneficial for our CSOs to actually have a validated, instead of just somebody on the other end of the phone saying this is, I don't know, I guess, is this program able to be built out that way in the
Andy's
future?
got a comment.
On Park side, we're also working on it. It's not part of the we'll do the same thing.
Okay.
We were going to do that earlier.
Yeah, sorry I left you out. I forgot. They got permits on that too, but.
On that part of it, we were going to do it earlier summer, COVID hit, so we delayed it, but by this time next year, school hits, we should have all that online.
And I would discuss it with Mike, but I would think that it might make sense to add in the fire inspections portion of it, just because then we could utilize it, but that's something I would have an offline conversation with you. Okay.
And we do have a section on here that, and it's, it actually says water and fire inspection, and we actually note on there that fire department did come and do their portion of it. We actually note that on there. One of the building inspectors do that. They note that fire department did sign off on particular permits.
And that's-
It's not needed obviously for electric, but for new build, they do mark that as
And
done.
that's where you could do the attachments as well.
We can, yes.
Okay, so that would link it together, so
It
you
would.
receive the attachment from them, documentation that had been done, check, fire department inspection, attachment, it's there.
Yep.
Would you mind if the chief spoke to the CSO portion or the parade permit or either or none?
The CSO are
Okay. Sure. Yep,
Well,
makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Chief, you also would have your system built out where it would do what we're working to do with this system, where it would link back, because you would have all of the history on a property.
It's taken us years to develop a database. That would be something. But I'm not close-minded to it. Right now.
Lawman's been around 15, 18 years, something like that, so you got that much history, yeah. Right.
And I wouldn't want to delve in. Not against it, I have to find out more about the system. But right now,
Sure, that makes sense. I was just thinking for feasibility issues wise, you know, if you didn't have to have that redundancy where it would keep your secretaries from answering the phones all the time, where a citizen can just put that in. But I totally understand where you're at, and I appreciate that. Sure. Sure. Is this live?
It is live. We've been live for 3 weeks. Every permit that we've put in since the middle of June is on here. Yeah, we're
Cool.
up and running, and everyone that comes into our offices as of right now has been live.
Well, and we wanted to do a soft rollout with this kind of being the kickoff of it, just to kind of have some time to work out bugs.
In case your mouse doesn't work or anything like that.
Like, here's all of our completed records. Have several.
So let's talk about inspections, which is, I think, probably the most important part of the new system. So whether it be very important rental inspections, because that's one thing that the city needs to pick up its game and do a much better job for the citizens. So when they go out to do an inspection, they will take their iPad and they will have the sheet right there or the iPad right there where they check off electrical, they check off rodents, the floorboard, like everything like that.
They will,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, and so if a property does not pass inspection, that means it cannot be rented.
That is correct.
So we will be able to keep track of going back and checking these properties to make sure that we're not getting these properties rented and have people living in them when they haven't passed inspection.
That is correct.
And
Not
when,
only that, but we're working to tie in with the Board of Public Works so that they have the knowledge that that place is not able to be rented and will not turn on utilities.
that's great, perfect. And then say electrical, they go out, they do it, they'll do the inspection right there on the iPad, so all the information will be in there. There will be notes, they need to be move 2 outlets, or there needs to be a power surge outlet there or something like that. And then when they go back and recheck, they'll have their notes right there and they'll know exactly what they're looking for and whether it passed and that kind of thing.
That is correct.
Perfect.
And they'll be
And-
able to take pictures at each of the initial building phase, at the recheck, at the final, so they can take pictures of each status going through.
Oh, awesome.
And then like when Mike, the assistant building inspector, goes out and does like his rentals, if something does fail, he can reject, take a picture of why it rejected, and then after, say he gives him 14 days to fix it, he sets it for 14 days. At 14 days, it will remind him, you have to go back and recheck that property. Every day it will remind him until he goes back and signs off on that property.
And it will simplify if another inspector needs to go out and look at something that a different inspector looked at first, everything will be right there in the file and it'll be cleaner.
And so I'm set up as administrator on this. Nobody else can change anything on the system except for myself. So let's say I've assigned something to Joey. He cannot go in and take his name off of a file unless I change it for him. So if I've given him, say 5 and he can't get to them, he can't assign them to Mike. They have to stay in his name until they are completed unless I go change them. So there is no way to delete them or move them or mark them off until they are
Absolutely.
complete. Yes. Yes, they can't just disappear. So it's a great program.
Nice.
And so it will give Susan reminders when she issues a letter in 10 days. It's going to give her a reminder that she needs to check that property to see if it was mowed, and if not, okay.
Once she puts them in her system, yes.
When she puts them in her system. We'll use when. She puts. Okay, I love it. Thank you.
Questions?
Good job.
Thank you for your time and hard work and everybody else that was involved.
Yeah.
Looks like a really great thing for the city of Hannibal.
Kevin, get you a better mouse.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, I so apologize.
Don't have any IT guys around anywhere, do we?
Okay.
Okay. That was pretty neat. I got it.
The labor of love.
It'll pay off in the long run.
She had a moment where she thought she hated it, but we moved past it.
I had a moment. Next day it got better.
I remember the implementation of Lawman at the police department, very similar setup. And I'll be honest, I thought I was going to quit over it. And within a few months, I don't recall how I would have ever lived without it. So it's a great management tool, and I think that's what we're looking for here is a management tool. I'll shut up. Continue.
Okay, my next item is the resetting of the public hearing at 9506 County Road 410 for the Ben Hickman property. This was tabled at the last council meeting because it did not make it through planning and zoning. It is reset for the planning and zoning meeting that is this Thursday, August 20th. Set for council at September 1st at 6:45. To annex in 9.9 acres.
A motion to approve this, the setting of this for Tuesday, September 1st, 2020.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
My last item on the agenda is for the property at 612 Mark Twain Avenue, the hotel. I do want to state first and foremost that I did have a typo on my memo. It did say that there were funds were available to demo this building. That is actually incorrect. It was supposed to say that funds were not available, so I do want to apologize for that.
The property owners
Right, the property
don't
owners,
have the funds to renovate.
Manish Patel and Magina Patel are the owners of the building. They have asked the city to take over the property because they do not have the funds to demo the building. This did go through building commission. This is one that has been on our watch list for a long time. It's been dilapidated for a long time. There's been many times that the street department has had to go up the property. The police department's been called to this several times for several different offenses. So they did approach the city about taking it over. So they have signed the general warranty deed and the settlement agreement. Both wife and husband have signed. We do have those paperwork on file. So that's so.
And that'll be resolution 2290-20 to follow. Anything
Couple
else?
questions. Do we have any kind of an estimate what it would cost to tear that building down?
That was my question as well.
No, we don't have an estimate, but if necessary, it can be done with staff as
Okay.
opposed to, it is not like the St. Elizabeth's former hospital site where we would have to hire someone to do
Okay.
it.
small enough to take care of the track. And then, is there any estimate on what the property is worth after this, the building was removed?
I don't think so.
No, not, the structure being on there devalues the property so much that it's hard to get an estimate of what it would be worth.
Just trying to ascertain if we were going to come close to breaking on the value of the property versus the demolition.
I believe that we potentially could,
I think there's potential
and that would
there.
not be an issue. And I also, in the amount of staff time with police and other that we will save from not having to have the police frequently at that address, I believe there's going to be a substantial savings with that, not to mention the burden on the neighborhood of having it right now, and prior to, it's been an issue.
Okay.
Plans for the property after the building's removed?
I mean, we would be open, I would imagine that the city would entertain any suitable development proposition, and I think we would work closely with Corey, who might be able to get some interest.
My thing is we have almost 500 houses on our demo list. Why does this hotel take over priority of those houses?
We don't have 500 that are actually on the list. There's 400 and some odd vacant that the chief will be talking about in his presentation.
Right.
Some of those will end up, some of those are actually already vacant properties, and some of them may be demos. But I don't think anybody, unless it would be your decision, or the building commission decision, to make it take precedence over anything else.
I mean, if we're going to tear down the hotel, it's going to burn up budget to not tear down other houses. I mean, that's my thing. We have a whole bunch of houses that have been on the demo list for a long, long time, and we're going to take over this hotel to tear it down.
I don't know that anybody is suggesting that you move the hotel in priority over the houses that have been on the list.
So then we just let it sit
Well, I don't know.
as we own it, just like St. Elizabeth.
Sitting anyway.
Correct.
The information we got
Building's not
states
on
right
us.
here that the owners were not able to remove the building as quickly and safely as necessitated. So that tells me that we're moving it up pretty high on our priority list. If you're gonna
Sounds like
put
that to me
in
also.
It is a major thoroughfare to our downtown historic district. People drive by this eyesore. There's drug addicts and other undesirable crime in that area.
I mean, you do realize it's in the middle of a piece of property owned by somebody else, the old parties, and then the bookstores on the other side of that. Have you taken a good look at that property lately?
Yeah.
That property's rough too. So, I mean, it's a thin piece of property that goes up the backside of a hill. So,
And we have a couple hundred houses that sit around St. Elizabeth. That's quite the eyesore also. But I just don't see how the city of Hannibal's in the realty business to take over properties like that, especially commercial properties that should be on the citizens' dime, not the taxpayers.
To me, it's more of a community standard. And
Community standard. Okay, good enough.
Well, and look, I would agree that cities shouldn't be in the real estate business, but we are. We are taxed with the burden of those who fail to maintain their properties. As you mentioned, those houses on the building commission list, we're going to be stuck with those because there are those who fail to maintain their properties and walk away from them. The same's going to happen here. They have no funding. They have no intentions of bringing it up to code or to remedy the problem. And like other dilapidated properties, we're going to ultimately end up with them. With us accepting them, we're doing no more than expediting the process of having clear title to that property and being able to market it and potentially get it back into a state of somewhat of a productive piece of property again. That was the expectation with the St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Had we not had the issues that's come up over the past 18 months, I thoroughly believe that project would have moved forward. But looking at the hospital and looking at this building, there's significant difference in the ability of the city to be able to remedy it. I agree. I chair the building commission, and I see the list of houses. Councilman Bowen, it's unreal. And we're just scratching the surface.
I agree.
And sadly, the lack of responsibility of owners of properties has forced the city to put the burden on the taxpayers to clean it up. I mean, that's just the sad truth of it. I don't like it. It tastes terrible in my mouth, but sometimes we have to swallow the castor oil to get better. And until we become more stringent with inspections and holding people accountable to the codes, we're never going to dig out of this. And I think the presentation come to follow here is going to address some of that. But the preceding presentation of how code enforcement and permitting and rental inspections will be more streamlined. I'm hoping that will help too, but
I hope so also.
it's an uphill climb, I know.
Yep. I've had a lot of citizens reach out to me in the past couple of days, so.
I've had one.
I've had more than both my hands, so. Okay, good enough.
Who's, as it sits right now, who's liable for anything that happens on that property? As it sits today? If any personal injury, anything like that, who's liable for that today?
Good question.
On the hotel property?
Right now, today.
Open, vacant, ready for people to break in.
Here's
and do things
here's
that
the
they shouldn't
parlay to
do.
my question, or the follow-up to my question. If we're not going to move it up on the list and we accept it, then we're ultimately responsible for any liability, anything that happens to that property, is the way that I understand it. If we have no intentions of moving it up on our list, is there a reason why we can't table this issue for a few more months, get some hard numbers on, or weeks, get some hard numbers on demo cost and gauge anything from Corey or anybody else on potential interest in this property to keep us from having that liability?
Would you like to do a liability
Yeah, I
aspect?
mean-
I can tell you that if we take possession of it, we will have the street department go out there and board that property up and sufficiently not just lock the doors so that they can be kicked in. Because that is a huge, Chief will tell you, I always say nothing good happens in an open, unsecured building.
Your issues of liability, I mean, depends on what you're talking about. A property owner is liable for various reasons, but generally it boils down to an issue of negligence. You're not liable just if someone gets injured on your property. I mean, it's a common misconception, but you have to have been negligent. And then you get into, various other things, attractive nuisance and blah, blah, blah. Lots of ins and outs. As to liable right now is going to be the people in whose property is vested. However, I anticipate they probably either don't have insurance on it or have insufficient insurance. If someone gets injured on it, they're not going to be able to recoup anything from them. I'm pretty confident that those people would just be left standing. I think the thing that I would suggest that the council probably ought to consider is that ultimately, if you get with a large building like this, property owners walk away, lose your ability really to get much done. With the old hospital, we had a property owner, and because we couldn't get things done in city court, we took them to state court, and it dragged out for 6 months. With just, they got a lawyer appointed because claimed to be incompetent, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, while the judge ordered him to make repairs and do things, if someone just belligerently refuses to do it, what are they going to do? Put them in jail? There's no debtor's prison allowed in the United States. So if they can convince a judge that they absolutely have no money to make the repairs, the judge, while they might put them in jail for a short period of time, after a while, they're going to let them out. So, you know, while this property is vested in individuals, at least it's not an LLC or a corporation, which make it very, very difficult to get a hammer on people. You're going to have a real difficulty getting anything done. And what I have seen in the however long I've been doing this is what happens is when you get a large piece of property, the city ends up taking it down, and then we have just have a lien on it. And if they don't pay their county taxes, the county cleans it out, and the people pay the county taxes, and then we lose our lien completely, and we lose it. The whole concept with going ahead and starting to take these commercial properties is twofold. One, give the city the ability to possibly try to recoup a portion of their lien, which in my experience we always end up spending anyway. And number two, that when you transfer it to somebody else, it gives you control, because as the seller, you have the ability to put covenants and restrictions, make sure that the property is going to be used in an appropriate fashion, et cetera, et cetera. The thing with houses and taking houses and tearing down houses, et cetera, the city manager has got a program that I think is a great idea, where we're starting to, it's similar to what we were trying to do with the Pride program, but it's probably a little better thought out as far as us going ahead and taking title to those properties, finding investors, flipping the properties, sometimes demolishing, other times maybe getting them to demolish. And the thing about it is, you're talking about residences, those are the ones where you're going to be more likely to be able to find a contractor, an investor that's going to be willing in and step in and do something, because the economies of scale work. But when you start to talk about these large commercial buildings, and I'm not telling you guys you have to do anything, but I think from a practical standpoint, ultimately, people look to the city to be the one to take care of these large messes. And if it's going to fall on your shoulders anyway, ultimately, why not get control of the situation before it becomes an insane, horrible mess, issue number one, and issue number two, also then give you control over what happens with that property on down the road, which you lose if you don't go into title. I mean, we got lucky, for instance, with the old YMCA, nobody would do anything. And it deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated, and ultimately the city spent a not inconsequential sum to tear that down, then it just sat because no one wanted to pay the lien, et cetera, et cetera. We got lucky on that one, and actually an investor purchased that from the property owner, and we got paid off. That's the exception, not the rule. The issue is, if that had not happened, that property might still be sitting and nothing happened to it. Whereas if we had gone into title on the property, we would have been the ones in control. And if there was an investor on down the road, maybe you could have done something like that. It's a question of whether you look at the long run or the short run. And in the long run, if you play the long game, more likely to get that back on the tax rolls, more likely to do things for people. But if you look at the short run, all the comments by the various council people are absolutely correct. In the short run, it's a bad idea. But in the long run, maybe it's not. And it's a question of whether you want to look at it on the long run, on the long game or the short game.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Or that'll be resolution 2290-20 to follow. We'll take it up then. Next item on the agenda is Chief of Police Lyndall Davis. Looks like you have a presentation.
My sidekick here was set up. I've got a little brief PowerPoint.
Hope you don't need a mouse.
Uh-huh.
Hope you don't need a mouse.
Edie's got one you can
Oh, he's
borrow.
gonna give me the clicker. Okay. I think I can handle this.
Please have
You're
all
here to
those cool
explain
tools.
this to me. I'm sorry.
You have all the cool tools.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, it's ours. Oh.
So why am I going to ask to speak tonight? Well, several months ago, I started vocalizing my concern at some of our staff meetings that we have every week at City Hall. about the ever-increasing number of vacant or unoccupied structures that we have in town, and the correlation with a lot of the criminality that we've been seeing, everything from drug addicts to arsons to homeless to runaway juveniles. There was always this common theme I kept hearing about is we had some burglars in this neighborhood and we figured out that they've been staying at this abandoned property, or we had a runaway juvenile that was from another neighborhood in town and went to another neighborhood and was able to find a vacant house, and it just goes on and on and on. Everything to one of the arsons that the fire department had to work, or somebody died in that. Once again, you had squatters, but there's drug addiction involved. So it's just a bad situation. And it was something that I wanted to know just how big of a problem is it. I think in order to tackle something, you really got to be able to identify the size of the issue. So in order to do that, we started asking around, and we asked the building inspector, Joey, what is it really, what's the definition? What is it when you determine a house or a structure is not inhabitable? And he said, focus on the water. If they don't have water, they don't have that water utility, then that's considered not habitable. We said, fine, that's what we'll do with. But we didn't have access to that type of data. And fortunately, the BPW, we reached out to them, and Matthew Jones, their IT person, was able to develop a list for us of all properties in the city of Hannibal that had not had water, and we said for at least 2 years. And that list was 1,134 properties. After they picked me up off the floor, we have to figure out how many of those actually fit that criteria that are causing us a problem. First off, does those structures still exist? Have they already been taken down? Have they been converted into another purpose or whatever, and they're no longer a problem for us? So since I'm the one that wanted the information, I tasked my community service officers to go out and physically check every one of these properties. And after several weeks of probably using my name in vain, they were able to develop a list for me, and with the help of my IT person, Eric, developed a very functional map of all these properties. And when you roll over it, it not only shows you the address, it shows you the owner, and allowed us to identify where these properties were. And I've shared that with Lisa, I think the mayor, and other members of the building commission. So tonight, if I could, I'd like to show you just a little PowerPoint to kind of help illustrate how this, why does the police department care so much about this? And just bear with me and I'll give you a little example. What you see there is over a 2-year period from May 8 of 2018 to May of 2020, all the search warrants that our anti-crime unit served. That's not all the search warrants that the police department served, but particularly that unit, and they focus mostly on drug distribution and manufacturing. So as you can see, there were 4 search warrants for heroin, 38 for methamphetamine, 4 for marijuana, 1 cocaine, and 3 for firearms, for a total of 50 during that time period. The next thing you see there, obviously in purple, is the city limits. The turquoise or blue area is where the highest concentration of those search warrants were done in. Little zoom in on that area. Now that is just a still picture of the map that Eric created for me. Now, the actual map allows you to zoom in, get a much better idea of where those locations are. Obviously, if you roll over the location, like I said, it'll give you the exact address. It'll give you even surveyor instructions, and as well as who owns the property. We didn't use that for this illustration because we're not here to embarrass anybody. This is just for your information. If you want to see that, we'll be more than happy to show you. Come down to the police department, we'll show you the actual map. The shaded area is where the majority of those properties are. That represents about 80% of those properties that we found. And I should have mentioned that we ended up narrowing it down to 467 properties where there were structures that we felt posed us a problem. So that's where the majority of those structures are at, in that shaded area. And when we overlap that with the narcotic search warrants, where the majority of those were, I think you can see, hopefully, the correlation. I don't think it's a shock to anybody, but sometimes you just have to look at it and really think about what that means. So I use this tree as an illustration. So most of the time, when we think about criminality, we focus on the top of the tree. This is what law enforcement, the media, even you sometimes focus on. Domestic violence, thefts, prostitution, animal neglect, burglaries, child abuse, robberies, all the headline stuff. But really in law enforcement, whether you hire me more officers, we make a bunch of arrests, do a bunch of search warrants, all we're doing is trimming back the branches of that tree. If you really want to get down to the roots of the problem, I'm not trying to be flippant here, is you got to go down and look at where some of this is being generated by. Obviously, part of the problem is these unoccupied structures, and then you go a little further and you get into the poverty, substance abuse, education, lack of high-paying jobs, and I know you're focusing a lot on that with Corey and your economic development. But this other part of the root system has to be addressed too, because there's not a week that goes by, it doesn't seem like there's a correlation to some one of these abandoned structures or empty structures. So that's really the point of my whole thing here. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. I'll entertain any of your questions. But those unoccupied structures erode the quality of life in these neighborhoods, and they become incubators for crime. And I'm telling you, I don't need 10 more officers. I need those issues to be addressed. And it will magically reduce crime, because those structures create a place for it to flourish. And if you really want to know more, set up a meeting with me and we'll start going through events and I'll show you exactly what I mean, or talk to your fire chief even on some of the calls that they go to, where these arsons are called by squatters going in here, doing drugs, doing other things, and next thing you know, we have a disaster on our hands. And that arson doesn't just affect that property, it affects everybody else in that neighborhood potentially in danger of that fire. So I was asked to bring this to your attention, and I'll entertain any questions.
Basically, the area that you identified mirrors the area that, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, you individually met with council people and had identified that area?
Deja vu all over again.
Okay.
It's the same pattern. The thing is, it's just like cancer. You can see it grow. So the thing is, you would think a police chief would be down here saying, I need 10 officers. Give me 10 more officers and I'll make this all go away. And I'm telling you, don't cut me anymore, please. But focus on those issues. Focus on those issues. And you will enhance our ability to deal with the top of the tree. But for years and years and years, we have hammered away at the top of that tree. And if you look at our press releases, very few days go by that you won't see some sort of major arrest for those up there. Under my administration, we more than doubled our arrest in those type of areas. We have 2 detectives full-time focusing on narcotic investigations. And that's what we need to keep that lid on that boiling pot. But if you don't attack and you don't pay attention to these bottom feeder issues, these root issues, then you won't be able to afford a police department big enough to tackle the problem. Yes, sir.
So of these 467 properties, how many of those need to be tore down then? If they haven't had water in 2 years, they can't be good.
According to the CSOs, it varied, but I can't give you an accurate, but they said several. Probably, I'm guessing probably at least half. But they're not into the building part of it as far as making that determination.
I'm just saying if somebody hasn't had water on in 2 years, it can't be still a nice house. I mean, most likely not. I mean, especially if they're squatters and.
But keep in mind, we started with over 1,000, 1,100.
Right.
Is what was actually on the list, and a lot of those had been removed or been converted into other things. But still, when you're talking about 467, and that was as of a couple months ago, so that number can fluctuate. But I'm not telling you here to tell you anything you don't already know. I just wanted to put a kind of a number with it. And then why would the chief care so much about it? Because there's such a correlation with it. Okay? And what you don't know is you yourself or my officers, when you drive through a neighborhood, you don't always know that residence is unoccupied or there's squatters in there. So you can have burglaries in a neighborhood, and all of a sudden this is a neighborhood. All of a sudden we're having burglaries. Where's all the suspicious people? They're living in the neighborhood. They're living they're squatting in these houses. Often it's drug addiction, but it's not always. It's homeless. It's mental illness. It's you name it. But I think the mayor said it or somebody else said it too. Nothing really comes good of these vacant, abandoned properties, whether they're commercial or residential. Nothing comes of that, and I've never met a chief or sheriff that would say otherwise. I think there's collegiate studies on this for years. By the way, this isn't unique to Hannibal. This is all over the country. I just think that we have leaders now that are really focusing on this, and they wanted me to, I think, kind of correlate how that affects law enforcement as well.
Well, and for the first time, we're actually working together, the police, the fire, the building inspector. Everyone is kind of having a coordinated effort, sharing information, gathering information, wrapping our heads around what the problem actually is so that we can do something about it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of momentum lately. I think, unfortunately, it's going to get worse before it gets better because you have such a huge task ahead of you. But at the rate you're going, at some of the efforts I see, I think in 2 or 3 years, you potentially could start turning this around. It's just the problem is you're really tackling a problem that didn't happen overnight. I would bet, Mayor, I'll pick on you, probably the last 30 or 40 years, we've probably seen the neighborhoods that we used to be young officers and patrolling erode before our eyes, right? I know we're telling our age, but that's just the reality. But that doesn't mean all is lost. I think the fact that we're focusing on that and we develop a plan, and I know how it is in my profession, just saying you have crime isn't effective. You got to develop a plan and you got to be laser focused on it or you can't achieve your goal. That's why I created the H unit, and I think you can see the statistics I presented, how effective they are. That's why I asked you to help me create the CSOs. I think you've seen those stats. If we take that same logic and we laser focus on this problem, then you're going to make my world a lot better because you're going to make your city a lot better because you're tackling these root causes.
This is a long game also.
I'm sorry?
This is a long game also.
It is.
I mean, we're
This is
going to
a
have to
marathon.
do over the next couple of years.
And it's been a long time getting here. This didn't happen 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40 years, you've seen it, and it's just, but you're starting to see the city saying, okay, and we're trying to turn that tide. Give yourself a little breathing room. And also recognize you're going to have to look at the little successes, but in 2 or 3 years, at the rate you're going, if you keep this focus and you keep building up your momentum, you can turn this thing around. But if we don't focus on it, and we only focus on the top of the tree, hey, Chief, I heard you had a burglaries. I heard you had some robberies. Good arrest. Good search warrant. Boy, your aces are doing a good job. I really appreciate those compliments. But if we really want to tackle the problem, we got to start down here at the root system. So, I mean, that's what I was asked to present my thoughts on this, and I shared it, like I said, with the Building Commission. They said really, and I think the mayor wanted me to present it to you as well. So,
Thanks, Chief.
First of all, thanks for putting all the work in, getting all this information. And so we have a program where if you have a rundown property, you can sign it over to us, and then we'll take care of this property. What do you suggest that we do with these unoccupied structures, the ones that aren't in our control?
well, we're obviously going to have to, a lot of times, a lack of funding can't stop you. You're going to have these creative ideas like Lisa and I think the mayor and others to come up with creative ideas to tackle this problem. Some of the things I've heard tonight that they've started to talk about are a different way of looking at the problem of trying to attack it. I think if we would have had this focus years ago, and I'm not saying the past administrations, past councils did a bad job, because obviously there's a lot of houses that have been torn down. The thing is, though, I think the problem was exponentially getting faster than the city's ability to tackle it. So we've got to refocus our efforts, and how can we laser focus on this problem? And I think that's what Lisa and the mayor and the building commissioner are trying to do. Obviously, we're teaming up with law enforcement, the fire, and CSOs, and all of us working together. But we also have to have the council understand what is driving some of the criminality in your community. I'm not saying if you get rid of all that crime goes away, but it greatly reduces, because these things are feeder that ultimately reduce the problem. Because a society that doesn't have all those problems actually polices themselves a lot better. You understand what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
What you're seeing at the top of the tree are symptoms of all this down below.
Yep.
And it's that way in nature, and it's that way with human nature as well. I think you all know that already. I don't think I'm telling you anything you didn't know. I think I'm just focusing you on it because I have to look at this all the time, and so do my people. But even police officers, chiefs, we get focused on the top of the tree, and sometimes you get to wait a minute. Some of this down here is really driving. Okay.
Well, and I think it's worth mentioning at this point, too, that we do have some initial interest in infill development of someone who is willing to take a chance. And in some of the areas where we've taken out many of the properties where we can go in and combine them and make larger lots, to come in and actually even build a spec house and potentially take off from there. And Andy was telling me the other day, we have sold more properties in the last 2 months than we have in the last 2.5 years. So to neighbors who are interested in them and subdividing them for that purpose, we're looking at even now simplifying that process. So,
So if I could just end with this, if I could. Don't take this as a negative. Take it as a positive that we are so focused and now we've identified the size of the problem. Now we're looking for the means to deal with it. And they're already coming. A lot of communities in the United States have this very problem, but they're not dealing with it effectively. Hannibal is starting to really try to deal with this. So you've got your department head level doing that. And I know some of the council's getting behind this because some of you I see on the building commission, you guys are really getting behind tackling these problems. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a focused effort. And probably within 2 or 3 years, you're probably going to reap some of the benefits. You're going to be able to start physically seeing a lot of the changes if you stay focused on the problem. But it's very easy, I know for me, to get caught up in those top issues. And we've got to also stay focused down here. When I first became chief, you might remember, we focused on the quality of life issues, which ranged everything from drug dealing all the way to barking dogs, loud music. Because if the environment isn't good for people to live in, they're going to move out and you're going to be left with all that's at the top. Same thing with the bottom of the roots here, the problems we see.
There's been some good discussion on abandoned properties tonight. For the record, is the hotel one of these properties that you
That
would?
was one of them that is identified. Like I said, on that snapshot, it's a combination of residential and commercial properties. We just went, they went right down the list and checked all over 1,100 and some, every one of them. And it was quite the task. And they tried to identify, was it occupied? Was it occupied by the people that should have been occupying it? Was there anything else there that they saw that was out of the ordinary? If they did, they reported the blue shirts. But once again, this isn't unique to Hannibal. What I think is unique is the fact that you're coming together and you're trying to focus and develop plans. So this can be a multi-pronged approach. Don't think, well, this is the only answer. It's not just money. Money's part of it. You got to find the funding. But all these other creative ideas. Use your brain will go a long way, these focused efforts. But the main thing is we've got to stay focused on this, or 5 years from now, it'll just be worse. And it may be beyond our means to do anything. But right now, you have that chance, and you are starting to turn the tide, but you got to stay focused.
and if we focus on this right now, we can turn this into an opportunity.
I think
If
the community's right for this.
don't-
I know for the CSO standpoint, a lot of times when they help clean up a part of a neighborhood, they get a lot of attention from the neighbors. So I think there's a lot of positive that can be done on this, and, success builds success. So, if you start turning the tide, you might start seeing some reinvestment in some of these neighborhoods once people really believe that the city is serious about this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief.
I just want to add one thing about the demos. So the street department, our kind of goal is to do 30 a year. I think 15 or 16, which is a huge number compared to what we have in the past. So we can average 30 a year houses. Starting there. But we're also also we're demoing them seeing us any little bit. It's scary. 43 houses they're offering. Tax. Probably going to get worse before it gets better. But he's making progress. I think we're all starting to work together, which is good.
Okay. Council, we're now to the resolution section of the agenda. We have Resolution 2290-20. I need a motion to have the clerk read the resolution, call the roll for adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
No.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cogdill.
No.
2. Okay. Resolution number 2290-20, a resolution of the City of Hannibal authorizing the mayor to execute a general warranty deed and settlement agreement and release for acceptance of donated property from Manish Patel, known as 612 Mark Twain Avenue, Hannibal, Missouri. Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
No.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cogdill.
Yes.
Okay, 5-1. I declare Resolution 2290-20 duly approved and adopted on this day. We now have Bill number 20-020. I need a motion to have the clerk give this bill a second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Bill number 20-020, an ordinance of the City of Hannibal annexing property located at 1200 Clark Street into the City of Hannibal, Marion County. Second and final reading. Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
Yes.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson.
Yes.
Councilmember Cogdill.
Yes.
Declare Bill number 20-020 duly approved and adopted on this day. We now have Bill number 20-021. I need a motion to have the clerk give this bill a second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Bill number 20-021, an ordinance of the City of Hannibal annexing property located.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Those are duplicates.
Well, yeah.
East of Clark Street. That's what threw us off. East of 1200 Clark Street, known as Robinson Cemetery, into the City of Hannibal. We were reading the right one.
Okay.
Second and final reading. Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
Yes.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson.
Yes.
And Councilmember Cogdill.
Yes.
I declare Bill number 20-021 duly approved and adopted on this day. We now have before us Bill number 20-022. I need a motion to have the clerk give this bill an emergency reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
Bill number 20-022, an ordinance of the City of Hannibal fixing and adopting the rate of taxation for the year of 2020 and levying taxes therefore. Emergency reading. Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
Yes.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson.
Yes.
Councilmember Cogdill.
Yes.
I declare Bill number 20-022 duly and approved and adopted on this day. Council now asking for motion to go into closed session in accordance with RSMO 610-021, paragraph 1 and paragraph 12, admitting myself, council, city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and Northeast Economic Development Director Corey Mahaffey.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion.
Mayor Hark,
Yes.
Councilmembers Bowen,
Yes.
Welch,
Yes.
McCoy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dobson.
Yes.
Councilmember Cogdill.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Chief and Edie, thank you for your presentations.